Consul General of Venezuela. We're very happy that you can all be here, and thank you so much for sharing with us tonight. I think the format will be presentations followed by hopefully an extensive question and answer. So without further ado, we're going to have Stan Smith, who has a special greeting from Ramon Lavanillo, one of the Cuban Five, unjustly imprisoned by the U.S. government for anti-terrorism efforts.
Stan. From September 12th to October 6th is like the International Cuba 5 month. September 12th was when they were arrested. October 6th is the day Posada guerrillas blew up that Cuban airliner and killed 73 civilians, and he's still walking freely in Miami. 3 of them are still in prison. 2 of them have served their time. I asked one of them to send greetings to this event here, so I'll read what this is from Ramon Lavanillo. It says, "Dear brothers and sisters in Chicago, it is an honor to send you the embrace and gratitude on behalf of my 4 brothers, our families, and the Cuban people and myself. We know the extraordinary effort of solidarity you carry out to support those who defend our homeland and our cause. We are very proud and grateful for everything you are doing. We are living in a special time in the relations between the U.S. and Cuba. That's why every step in mobilization for our freedom and the future of our 2 nations is really important. We firmly believe that we deserve to live in a different and better world, a new world where human beings, not money, is the essence and the most important thing in society. One example is the ELAM, the Latin American School of Medicine, through which our poor country offers free education in medicine to students of many countries around the globe, including the U.S. Healthcare is one of the most important human rights and should be free for everyone. Another example that a new world is already here is the new Latin America that is fighting to unite every country in a more just and friendly way, following the dreams of our martyrs and heroes from Bolivar, San Martin, Sucre, Martí, and many more. Today, Venezuela and Cuba enjoy a very close and helpful relation in the interest of improving the living conditions of our peoples. We share the same goals and dreams. It is a way to show that homeland is humanity, as our national hero, Jose Martí, once said. Finally, we want to use this opportunity to extend our gratitude to all our sisters and brothers in the Venezuela consulate in Chicago who are doing an excellent job not only for their country, but for Cuba in defending our own cause. Again, thank you so much for being here today and fighting by our side. United we shall overcome. 5 hugs. Ramon Lavanillo Salazar. I can pass out some cards if you want to sign. I can mail them to Obama after the free the Cuban 5.
With that, I think we'll begin with our first presenter, Dr. Corey Marshall, who's going to tell us a bit about medicine in Cuba and alone.
Hi, everybody. So, as I said, my name's Corey. I'm a recent graduate from the Latin American School of Medicine. I graduated in 2012. I'm currently doing residency here in Chicago right now to finish my training. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the school for people who aren't familiar with it and kind of give you an idea of what the school does. And just start off a little bit with the history. So the school was started in the late 1990s. And it was a response to, around that time, Hurricane Mitch hit Central America and wiped out, kind of devastated a lot of those areas. And so a lot of countries sent aid to kind of help with the rebuilding, especially in medicine. And Cuba kind of looked at the situation, wanted to do something to help contribute to that, but they don't have a lot of resources. But they said, there's actually a bigger problem in these countries, which is that they don't have kind of a healthcare system set up to deal with these kinds of devastating events, but also just, regular day-to-day health problems. So instead of sending resources, which they don't have a lot of, they decided to start a school in Cuba where they would train young people from those countries that were devastated to become doctors and then to go back to their countries and practice medicine in those areas that needed it the most. So they took over an old naval base, they kicked the Navy out and converted it into a school and then accepted students from these countries. And as the years went by, other countries saw the program and said, this is a really interesting thing and we have underserved people too. We need this kind of medical training. And so they slowly, well actually kind of quickly, expanded the program to include more and more countries. Then in the early 2000s, a congressman from Mississippi went to Cuba on a tour. And one of the things he saw on the tour was this school. And he was very impressed by the school, but he raised the point with the Cuban officials that there were people in his congressional district who were living in the same or worse conditions than a lot of these people in these underdeveloped countries. And so he said, why don't you take our students too to train them? And the Cubans thought about it and said, okay, we'll take them. You send us your kids and we'll train them to be doctors. So since that time, I think somewhere close to 200 students have graduated from the United States from that program, and there continue to be somewhere between 15 and 20 students in each year of the career in Cuba studying. And so everybody who goes to the school goes completely for free. The only thing that we pay is our travel back and forth. The school covers housing, it covers books, any kind of educational materials we need. Sometimes it even covers clothes and shoes and bedding, anything that we need. That if people need it, then they find a way to get it for people. And the only requirement that they have is that people who come to the school are committed to going back to the places that they're from and working in medically underserved communities. And I think one of the things that makes the school particularly interesting and successful is not only does it provide this opportunity for people to study medicine for free, but there's things that we learn in Cuba that you don't really learn in medical school anywhere else, and it's the example of the Cuban healthcare system. So Cuba has this very revolutionary approach to medicine that they, one of the major goals of the revolution was to expand medical care to everybody in the country, and they came up with this system called MHE, which is basically a system of primary care that's based in the neighborhoods, it's based on communities and families and primary care physicians doing the brunt of the work of getting people access into the healthcare system and making sure that people were really connecting with services. And so one of the great opportunities that we had as students there was to learn about how that system worked and how effective it was at providing healthcare services and also in a more cost-effective way. And so I think that's one of the major strengths that the program has in terms of, especially for the U.S. And it's, we often talk about the blockade against Cuba from the point of view of how it hurts the Cubans, but I think it's one of the most kind of important things that hurts us, because especially in kind of the climate we're in healthcare right now, there's a lot of changes being made. The Affordable Care Act is kind of changing how we look at medicine, in addition to a lot of other things. I know the clinic that I work at right now is in the process of transitioning into being more patient-friendly and trying to provide services more effectively, and it's painful to me almost just to see, because I lived and trained in this system that did all the things that we're trying to do here, but we're missing the point here, and we're not able to get there because we're missing the kind of bigger picture of what healthcare should be and how it has to be run. I think the changes we're making here are not big enough yet. And so I think that's one of the kind of lessons that Alam can like kind of brings to the United States with the doctors that they're training coming here. So that's kind of my thing, but hopefully we can have questions afterwards if people want to know more specifics.
Next presenter will be Jesus Rodriguez, telling us about the medical programs, I think operated jointly by Cuba and Venezuela.
Yes, yes. Hello to everyone. My name is Jesus Rodriguez and I'm the Consul General from Venezuela. I've been living here in Chicago for the last 9 years already. So maybe I know most of you, or at least some of you. I bring a long presentation in comparison with your time. I want to try to make it shorter. But I usually like to present a general slide with information about Venezuela, and it's important for people that know where we are and the most important figures that we have to show. So we are basically located where you see there in the map in the north tip of South America, and we consider ourselves South Americans, but also very Caribbean. Some people don't understand that, but most of our population lives in the shores, and most of our people consider themselves or behave themselves more than Caribbean than South American. It's important to understand that. We have a population bigger than 30 million people, an area close to 350,000 square miles. It's close to the area of Texas, New Mexico, and Oklahoma, maybe. Unemployment rate as December 2013 was 5.6%, and we are happy because we have been struggling with economic problems since Chavez's death. So thankfully, the unemployment haven't affected us too much. Our GDP grew in 1.6% last year, and that's also important because of what I just told you. And the inflation was 56%. That's one of our biggest economical headaches. And we have been trying to fix it, but the situation is not easy. But I want to show you, I'm going to show you some slides where you can see how the inflation was before the revolution and how we have been handling the inflation figures for the last 12 or 14 years. We were declared by UNESCO in 2004, I believe, free literacy territory because our literacy rate is less than 4%, and we did that with the help of the Cuban people. We started a social program named Mission Robinson, and in less than a year and a half we teach how to read and write more than 1.5 million Venezuelans. So that was something great that we did and that we are still doing. But I always say that we didn't stop there. We created additional social programs that took those ones that finished the literacy program and allowed them to finish elementary school in a fast track. And then we took those ones to another social program in which we taught them, in which we prepared them to finish, they finished actually high school in fast track too. So we have a big number of people right now studying in universities because of those programs that were very comprehensive in the way we took people that were abandoned by the economy, by the society, and we, bring them to the educational system. So, of course, we speak Spanish, and we have around 29 different indigenous languages in Venezuela. So that's a general idea of what we have in the country. First, I want to give you some figures, some information about Barrio Adentro. Barrio Adentro was launched in 2003, a few months after the coup d'etat against Hugo Chavez in 2002. And the situation in Venezuela was very delicate. And with the cooperation with the Cuban government, we launched at that moment in 2003 Mission Barrio Adentro and Mission Robinson. Misión Barrio Adentro is what she just mentioned about the Cuban system of, introducing doctors to the neighborhood. And that's basically what Misión Barrio Adentro is. We basically launch a massive operation in which we put Cuban, mostly Cuban at that moment, and Venezuelan doctors in the poorest neighborhoods all over the country. We started with a pilot program in Caracas, and the program was that successful that the mission was spread all over the country. And I believe that it's important to say that what I mentioned there in the third point, that the mission was created using a very innovative and low-cost launch design. I mean, a lot of people say that we in Venezuela, because we have a lot of oil, we can do a lot of things, and the truth is that this Barrio Adentro mission start very base and community-oriented. I mean, what I'm trying to tell you is that the Cuban doctors arrived to Caracas in the pilot program, and they didn't have where to stay, and the communal councils start to organize themselves to find the houses in the poorest shantytowns in Caracas where the Cuban doctors were going to receive their patients. And they lived there for a while, and then maybe 1 or 2 years later, we start building the clinics for so the program was based in community solidarity. And it's important to say that, and also Mission Robinson, the literacy mission that I mentioned before, was also based in that, and a lot of work and cooperation among communal councils and the government. So I believe that it's important to mention those things. I found some figures that are important to mention. I mean, we are close to 2 million Venezuelans that have been served in Misión Barrio Adentro since 2013, until 2013. Barrio Adentro have more than 600 million medical appointments completed. Right now, at least until last year, we have almost 13,000 Cubans and Venezuelan doctors working in Misión Barrio Adentro, and more than 4,500 dentists and almost 8,000 nurses. We have built 6,700 community medical clinics that are the places where the Cuban doctors live in the neighborhoods. I'm going to show you some photos later about those clinics. And we built also 550 medical diagnostic centers, 580 rehabilitation centers, 33 high technology centers, and 459 optometric centers. That's as 2014. So the first big figure that I mentioned you refers to the first level of the health system, and the last three infrastructures that I mentioned you refers to the second level of the health system that we have been trying to develop. And I believe that we have been doing a nice job doing that, and the level that we haven't reached properly yet. I believe that we are doing good things about it, but we still need to do more. Is the third level, the level of the hospitals. So, but I'm going to just show you some figures about that anyway. And during this time, more than 600,000 people have received an eye operation that is related to the health programs, but this is part of another mission that we call Mission Milagro. So that's something that I wanna some figures that I wanna show you about, recent figures about Barrio Adentro Mission, and now I wanna show you some numbers and some information about ELAM, which is the Venezuelan franchise of the Cuban Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina. We call it Salvador Allende in honor of the Chilean president, and we opened it in 2007. So we have been working there for more than 7 years already. we have right now students from more than 42 countries. And they start, I believe, with students from 12 countries. So we have students from Asia, Middle East, Africa, and of course Latin America. What else I have to tell you? And we have, there are 1,700 foreign students as 2014. And all of them are foreign students. In that school we only receive foreign students, but this year we received a group of 200 Aboriginal Venezuelans that joined the LAM Venezuela, and that's why the number increased a little bit this year. So another thing that is important to say, and I believe that we share that from the Cuban LAM, is that the student has to be proposed, has to be, I don't know the right word to say, but by grassroots, nominated by grassroots organizations, by progressive organizations, in order to, try to guarantee that the people that are going there are going to have like the consciousness that is required to try to accomplish the promise of, serving the people after finishing the career. What else I have to tell you? We have, among those 1,700 students, 400 of them live in the Mariches headquarters of the ELAM Venezuela. But the rest, because the students live in that headquarters for the first 2 years of the career. In the last 4 years of the career, they are spread all over the country in different medical institutions of Venezuela. So that's why you have the number of 400 students that are right now living in the headquarters that we have in Mariches, that is a place close to Caracas. It's important to mention also that all the degrees are recognized by other countries. And I believe that that's important because here in the US it's kind of complicated, according to what I hear, to have the degree validated or something like that, right?
Yeah.
Some people are going to ask you about that, I'm sure.
Excuse me, what are the ALBA countries? What does ALBA stand for?
Venezuela, Bolivia, Ecuador, Cuba, of course, Dominica, Grenada, Nicaragua, St. Kitts and Nevis, and I believe that a few months ago joined 2 other Caribbean countries that I don't remember right now, but I believe that the number increased by 2 this year. I don't remember the countries. So
Thank you. I just wanted the general.
Yes. So
Trinidad and Tobago, is it?
no, I don't think so. They are very not. What else? So there is what I mentioned you, 6-year degree with 2 years of preparatory studies in Mariches and 4 years in medical facilities all over the country. In 2012, almost 200 students were enrolled. That's what I mentioned before, from 19 Aboriginal Venezuela ethnicities. So I tried to name all the ethnicities that joined ELAM Venezuela this year. So that's basically the most important part of the information. These are some figures that I want to show you. This one is based on 2010 figures, so you might find some discrepancies to the figures that I mentioned before, because this is kind of outdated. But you can see there the number of popular consultorios, that is what I told you, the buildings where the Cuban doctors and the Venezuelan doctors receive their patients, and they live there, and they are there 24/7. We have all the numbers that I mentioned. There's not a big change in the numbers. In this one, you can see the number until 2012, the number of appointments. So as 2012 was more than 700 million appointments, more than almost 400 million blood tests, laboratory tests. Consultas en terreno are like 200 million, more than 200 million consultas, I mean, in the
Home
terrain.
visits.
How do you call it?
Home visits.
Home visits. Almost 3 million high technology tests like resonancia magnética and things like that. Almost 2 million operations, and this is in Misión Barrio Adentro. More than 300,000 lives saved, and more than almost 8,000
Births.
that are not supposed to happen, but happen in the Misión Barrio Adentro. Here you can see the number of people, lives saved by Misión Barrio Adentro through the years. So I believe that it's important to say that, and it's important to say and remark that those lives are among the ones that traditionally in Venezuela didn't have even once in their life the chance to visit a doctor. So I believe that it's very important to say that those are the ones that this program is benefiting. Here you can see, this is a general slide, but you can see the difference in how much we are as a country investing from our revenues, sorry that is in Spanish, in social, I mean what we call social investment. So you can see here, during the period from 86 to 98, this is our revenues, and this is the proportion of the Venezuelan revenues directed to social programs. And here you can see our revenues during this particular period and the proportion of our revenues that goes to social investment. So that's, I believe, helps you to understand our priorities, especially because some people try to be tricky presenting numbers about how much we spend from the GDP perspective, percentage, and some try to take the numbers that for example, the budget from the Ministry of Health in Venezuela, and they say that that's what we have been investing in health. And the truth is that, for example, Misión Barrio Adentro is financed by the Ministry of Health, but it's also financed by PDVSA, which is our oil company. So that's just to give you an idea, because you finding those figures, I find also information from the opposition, from the right-wingers in Venezuela, trying to, trick with the numbers, make games with the numbers. So I wanted to show you that. This is something that I believe that is important, that show how we have been behaving with the Gini index. I don't know if you know what the Gini index is, but it's something that represents something that we understand is represent in the best possible way, using numbers, the inequalities in an economy. So basically, that's the evolution of Venezuelan Gini through the years. So that show that if the figure gets closer to zero, that means that you are doing it right. So we somehow are doing that. This is something important also, is that how we have been combating poverty in Venezuela. And the first line, the green line, shows you the poverty line in Venezuela and how the poverty line has been behaving in recent years. And this is the extreme poverty line. So you can see that before Chavez in 1999, we were close to 30% of poverty, and right now in 2013 we were in close to 19%. In talking about the extreme poverty, we were talking about 13%, and in 2013 we are talking about 5.5%, and we don't stop trying to make those numbers go down, even after Chavez disappearance.
What do you consider poverty?
That's a good question, but it's basically a measure of satisfaction of needs. It's based. I believe that those are United Nations standards, but there's a list of needs that are satisfied. So you enter in the list of extreme poverty if you have a number of those needs are not satisfied. I'm not an expert on that, but that's basically what I understand is the way they make those numbers. This is, and that takes me to what I told you about the number of students that we have in high school, not in high school, in college education. So we are right now in the second place in Latin America in the ratio of people studying in universities. And that doesn't happen out of the blue. That happened because of the programs that I mentioned you. I mean, the educational programs that I mentioned at the beginning, but also you have to add to that the investment in building and strengthening the building new universities and strengthening the universities that we had before. So I believe that according to these figures from UNESCO, we are in the fifth place, at least until 2008, in the world in the number of people enrolled in universities. This is the unemployment behavior in Venezuela. So you can see how, and you say 5.6%, and sometimes we forget in Venezuela that we have during the 90s unemployment that was always between 5 and 15%. This is the pensions in Venezuela, which I love this slide because it shows the number of pensionees that we have before Chavez and the number of pensionees that we have right now. And I love this slide because it shows that we are going against the flow of the universe. Because everywhere else, except amongst a few countries like Cuba and Bolivia and progressive countries from Latin America, I believe, we have been trying to, revert that trend that is trying to get rid of people's and workers' achievements. So that tells you a lot, and that's happened. Though that number happened because we include housewives to be beneficiary of pensions. We include fishermen and peasants that didn't belong to a formal company and never pay their dues for the security, social security system. And we reform the laws to make inclusive the social security system to everyone, and that's we have. And also we adjust we have the inflation in Venezuela that affects us a lot, but that minimum, that pension that they receive is adjusted every year because of the inflation. So we try, the inflation affects us, but we try to compensate that with adjustment in the minimum wage. So that's it. I want to show you just a few, the photograph. Those are the consultorios de Barrio Adentro, the buildings that I told you where the Cuban doctors built. So they basically live in the second floor and they receive patients in the first floor and they stay there 24/7. And those are the ones that I mentioned that we have close to 7,000 of them all over the country. What else? Those are the infrastructures, the clinics in the second level for specialists, tests and rehabilitations. We call them CDIs. This is the Escuela Salvador Allende. These are photos from the Escuela Latinoamericana de Medicina Salvador Allende. This is headquartered in Mariches, and I just find some good photos to show you about the students that we have there. And we have people from Salvador. These are the indigenous people that they received these years. This is people from Paraguay. This is people from Palestine. I believe that last year we received a big contingent from students from Palestine. This is the hospital, the biggest kids health hospital in Caracas. We have been investing a lot of money in stadiums, in infrastructure for sports also. We actually launched a satellite a few years ago with the help of the Chinese people. It's important to say that we negotiate that project with the French, the British, and the Chinese were the only ones that accept our technology transfer clause. So we have prepared more than 1,000 engineers from Venezuela in China, And the plan is that, and we are actually working on that in building a fabric of satellites, small satellites in Venezuela, and we expect that the third satellite that we launch, because we already launched another satellites like last year or 2 years ago, is going to be one made in Venezuela. So we have invested in roads all over the country, infrastructure for massive transportation. This is a metro. Everything that I'm showing you right now are projects that has been developed during Chavez time. This is a metro of Los Teques, which is a suburb of Caracas. This is the metro of Maracaibo, which is the second city in Venezuela. This is the metro of Valencia. This is one railway that takes people from Caracas to Cuba, which is another suburb of Caracas. This is another railway. We didn't have anything of this. We didn't have railways in Venezuela at all. These are mass transportation systems that we have developed in Caracas. This is another one that takes people that live in the tourist shantytowns to their houses with these funicular systems. And this is it, basically. Aeolic wind parks. And Conviasa, I showed that plane there because in the 90s, we have our airline, Venezuelan flag airline that was Viasa. And because of the neoliberal trend, the government at the time privatized that airlines, and that airline was bought by Iberia, the Spanish one. And Iberia didn't have Viasa, the Venezuelan airline, for more than a year before they started selling the planes in pieces. And we lost our airline. So when Chavez came back, he decided to create a new Venezuelan public airline, and that's why I showed you that plane over there. And that airline is right now doing a nice work in serving Venezuela and destinations, international destinations also. And we're very proud of that, and that reminds us of the bad scenes from the neoliberal times. So that's it. That's what I wanted to show you.
That was inspiring.
Yeah.
Next, we're going to have Ann Sheets, who I think will tell us a bit about how these wonderful examples of Cuba and Venezuela shine a light on what's wrong with our health system, and also maybe point the way to something much better. If I've understood correctly.
Well, I did read that the young doctors do not always stay in their clinics, that sometimes they go out dancing. And believe it or not, in this description, I found one thing that the U.S. healthcare system shares with the Venezuelan system, which is that the right wing makes games with the numbers. They do that here too. So aside from that, you know, the Venezuelan system and the Cuban system are structured just diametrically opposite to what the United States has, and what the Affordable Care Act is pushing us farther and farther in a trajectory against medicine for the people and into medicine for profit. I mean, it's amazing how many different ways entrepreneurial types are finding to make money out of the complexity of the Affordable Care Act. So I think we all know that, and we know that a single-payer healthcare system is a necessary but by no means sufficient condition for healthcare justice. And most of the single-payer movement works for a system that is publicly financed but mostly privately delivered. But there is a minority position that we should just go for a fully socialized system, maybe on the model of our veteran system. So where in this country, and where in particular in Chicago, can we find examples of people who are doing the best that they can to move in that direction? And we have nothing at all comparable to this. But I want to go through 4 things that I think are happening in Chicago that contribute to this. And there are some people here who are more expert in these than I am, and maybe would take questions after too. So I'm going to start with the fight for the Trauma Care Coalition on the South Side. The single-payer movement does not take a position on where trauma centers should be located, nor on whether trauma centers are more important than dental care, anything like that. We do take the position that institutions and services should be founded on where they are needed. That should be what we start with. The position of the University of Chicago, if I could put it in ordinary language, is we do whatever the hell we please, and whatever we choose to give our neighborhood, you all should be grateful for it. That's about what it amounts to. And what we have in these young people organizing on the South Side for a trauma center at the University of Chicago is young people who live around the university saying, no, you owe it to the community around you to be responsible and accountable to us. And they have, there are some young people here who are really involved in the trauma center movement who can tell us more. And they've gotten lots of publicity, and the thing is, they have not stopped fighting for this. So that's one of the things that I think is really inspiring. Standing up to a very wealthy private institution and saying, this is what you owe to your community. Then I would mention the organizations that fight for disability rights in Chicago. There's been an attempt to turn people with movement disabilities who have to leave at home and need services in order to stay at home, or they have to go to nursing homes, to turn those people and the personal assistants who help them to stay at home against each other. So there was actually a challenge that went to the Supreme Court and was decided against the people that we care about, that people, the caregivers, the personal assistants are in part employees of the state, but in part employees of the people that they take care of, who choose them, have to make decisions about what they can do and what they can't do, that kind of thing. So it's very much centered in the person who's being cared for. The Supreme Court decided that you can't require people in this position to pay union dues. So this is an SEIU, Service Employees International Union. They can't be obliged to pay dues. The response of the people in SEIU is to say, okay, well, we're going to get them to voluntarily pay dues. But I think the important thing is that this right-wing group who started this lawsuit tried to convince people with disabilities and their families, and they did convince a few, that the interests of the personal assistants were contrary to their own. That if they got services, the personal assistants had to get less pay and less hours, and if the personal assistants got more pay and more hours, they had to get less services. Well, the disability rights organizations are not going along with that. They're saying, no, it's actually to our benefit when the people who provide our services make a living wage, have dignity in their jobs, and stay in their jobs and continue to take care of us. So this is another thing that I think is very important, and it's not happening everywhere in the country. There are parts of the country where people with disabilities and SEIU are on opposite sides. Then another example is the Alliance for Community Services, which is state workers, AFSCME workers, and clients who receive state services, organizing together along with community allies. So again, this is another big departure, because we are told that public employees are our enemies, because they're making huge amounts of money, getting huge pensions, and if it weren't for that, we'd all have a lot more money in our pockets. And these are people who receive those services and people who provide those services coming together to organize. There are some specific things that they have in common. All of these things have lots of contradictions and lots of, difficulties involved in them. But so the state offices are not being maintained well. I mean, I think the landlords have connections in state government. We know that there are some legislators who have friends who are in real estate. So some of the offices have bed bugs and mice, and they don't have heating, proper air conditioning. Many problems, and these problems are just ignored. The landlords don't want to fix them, and they're not made to fix them. The city won't intervene. They say somebody has to get injured first. The employees and the clients are not interested in somebody getting injured first. They're interested in this being fixed, and they're coming together to organize. And the last thing I'd like to mention is the Chicago mental health movement. This is a movement of patients. They prefer the term consumers. And the people who have provided services in the Chicago public mental health clinics for decades, coming together to organize to preserve our public mental health clinics. And I would say this is maybe the most important place that I see us as trying to hold the line against going the complete opposite direction to where Venezuela and Cuba have gone. And to say, we want publicly delivered, publicly financed services for people. We want them to be in our neighborhoods. And this, I think it's a really remarkable movement because it is largely directed, almost entirely directed. I mean, they get a little help from the union and there are other community people like us who come in to work, but it's really directed by the people who are getting services in those clinics. And as many of you know, 6 of our 12 clinics were closed. They were already down to 12 from 21. So, and that's an ongoing thing. And again, it's very difficult. These are people who had severe mental health issues, some of whom have been the victims of trauma themselves, have lost their children to violence, have had depression or bipolar disease their whole lives, coming together to organize. So these are the places where I see us as moving in the direction that Cuba and Venezuela are showing us.
I think we now have time for question and answer. Maybe at the beginning we'll start by taking a few questions in a block and then letting our panelists respond to them together, and then sort of letting a discussion develop out of that. I think we have a perfect size group for an excellent discussion. So yeah.
My question is about Cuba and Venezuela. I mean, what we have in the U.S. is tons of resources and high technology and pharmaceuticals up the wazoo, and but you know, but a shortage of healthcare providers in the streets, in the communities, available to people. You guys in Cuba and Venezuela have something of the opposite, and I'm curious as to how you're doing, and especially Cuba, because I've been there and seen what's there, on building up the resources. Are things any better now than they were 10 years ago? Are the pharmacies stocked? Are there, are the operating rooms? Do they have sufficient instruments of various sizes? Is it getting any better?
Should we? Or actually, yeah. I think we can respond to questions individually.
I think that progress is slow in Cuba, but it's definitely moving. I know while I was studying there, they were moving into laparoscopic technology for surgery. So we had one of the physicians at our hospital who was starting to do laparoscopic gallbladder removals, and he went to a training in another country and came back, and they got the technology. It was old technology compared to what we're using here, but you know, the kind of earlier forms of the laparoscopic stuff. There's still a big problem with access to medications, especially as you're saying, in mental health is one of the biggest ones, because you know those are some of the more expensive medications and not the best medications, so it's kind of important to have all of them available to kind of play around with. But I know Cuba's doing a lot of, they're moving towards doing their own, producing their own pharmaceuticals, so they don't have to depend on other countries to import them. And also doing a lot of research into novel kind of technologies that they can use and even export to other countries. I know they're doing a lot of research in cancer specifically for kind of new technology. So I mean, it's still a huge problem, but it's also just a difference in how they use technology. Like one of the things that just blew my mind when I got to the United States was every single patient who comes in with belly pain is going to get a CT scan. If you go to the emergency room and you have abdominal pain, they're going to do a CT scan on you. And in Cuba, usually they're looking for appendicitis. In Cuba, not a single appendicitis has ever gotten a CT scan, because the doctor goes in and examines the patient and sees if they have appendicitis. And they probably operate on a few people more, you know, people who you're not quite sure and maybe they didn't need the operation, but overall, you know, the survival rate is really as well. So they find ways of not depending on the technology as much to be able to save those CT scans for people who actually need them. So
In the case of Venezuela, I just want to add that yes, it's a problem always dealing with resources. Actually, a lot of people were criticizing, especially people, the right-wingers in Venezuela were criticizing that we haven't put too much attention to the barrio adentro units in Venezuela, and that they were some of them that were closed, and that might be true in part, but I mean the whole overall system is still working, and the government has announced that we are going to still strengthen in that system. And what I believe we did in Venezuela is that we make a big investment very fast, and a lot of people are right now like kind of expecting that you are going to keep doing that forever, and sometimes you can, but I believe that we have a nice infrastructure of Venezuela, of barrio adentro units all over the country, and I believe that the idea is trying to get into the third, and that's what we have been trying to do, into the third level of the health system, and the fourth, they have been talking about the fourth level. So, but yes, it's a problem everywhere. It's not a problem here in the US or in Cuba. It's a problem everywhere. You have to prioritize, and you are affected by the ups and downs in the economy. For example, right now, Venezuelan economy has been affected by the exchange rate, for example, especially after Chavez death. So we have a lack of some medicines in the country.
Other questions?
For Corey, so your goal is to practice in this country, right? So what have been the problems and the barriers? How has the American government and the medical establishment reacted to students who come from Cuba, medical students who come from Cuba? Are they trying to dissuade you, or what's your experience been?
So one of the big struggles that the school had was at one point a few years into when American students started going there, we kind of lost our permission to go. So the travel regulations to Cuba changed, and the school was no longer covered under the general license, so students were no longer allowed to go to the school. And there was a time when there was a class of students who were kind of in limbo because they went to Cuba legally, the law changed, and then they weren't there legally anymore, and they were kind of up in the air. But some people kind of went to bat for us, and the school now has a special exception to the travel restrictions, and so we get a license to travel to Cuba. So that was a big step for us. In terms of recognition of our degree from Cuba, we don't have a problem with that specifically. So my understanding is that the U.S. will recognize any medical institution that's recognized by the World Health Organization, and so the Cuban system is recognized by WHO. So our degree is recognized, but getting the degree is not the hardest part in getting licensed in the United States. It's actually the series of exams that we have to take in getting into a residency program. And so foreign grads traditionally have a big problem getting into residencies. Typically, it's something like 60–65% of people who graduate in foreign medical schools and apply to come to residency in the United States will make it in. Our schools has a pretty good rate. We're more at about 90% so far, and some of those people who haven't made it in are still trying. But there's a big cost burden. Those 3 tests, it's a series of 3 tests that we have to take. They each cost about $1,000. Students who study in the United States are trained from the first day of medical school and how to pass those exams because they know everybody's going to. Our schooling is all in Spanish and has nothing to do with that and is completely different, and it's a different style. So that's a big problem for us, is kind of passing those tests. And how well you do on those tests, and if you pass on the first time, plays a big role in whether or not you're going to get into a residency program when you get here. So that's kind of the struggle that we have. But there's also a community of people other doctors who work in residency programs or residency affiliated hospitals, and people who graduated from the program who kind of try to help the classes that are coming in now to find places to be able to do the residency.
Can I add something related to the question? But besides what you said, you don't feel like there's a rejection to you for coming from Cuba, the communist people, and those things?
So I think that there's it narrows the field a little bit in terms of where you can apply and where you can reasonably expect to get in. But the other thing is that Cuba has a reputation in the world for its medicine, for having really good medicine training, really good doctors, and so it kind of depends on who you talk to. So the residency program that I'm in had some foreign grads who had, not through my program, but are Cuban born and had studied medicine in Cuba, and so they were excited about accepting people, and they gave interviews to a number of people in my school, from my school, because of the experience of working with these other Cuban trained doctors. So, you know, there's a lot of programs that are probably closed off to you because people see Cuba and kind of shut down, but there's also probably some programs that are a little more open to us because people are aware of that reputation that Cuba has in the world for training doctors. So, it goes both ways.
Questions?
I know the social programs in Venezuela try to serve the needs of the poor communities and also try and involve those people in helping to shape the program. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that interaction between the people who are being served and how they help tell the government really what they need.
Yes, it's somehow related to what I mentioned you when I was talking about Barrio Adentro and how we start Barrio Adentro and also Mission Robinson. Basically, the communal councils that were very incipient at that time, I'm talking about 2003, organized themselves. And for example, I know about cases where communal councils organize themselves to try to identify the better house that among in the barrio that is going to be suitable for having a medical doctor and delivery the appointments from there, because they didn't have a building to do that. So they, at the beginning, did that from the people's houses. And then choosing from the communal council people the nurse that was going to help the Cuban doctor. And I believe that they organized themselves in different ways in order to make that project happen. And you have to talk about logistics, you have to talk about infrastructure, you have to talk about how to deliver the medicines that are provided for free in those places to the people and bring them to the warehouses. So you have to do a lot of work to make it happen, but the communities, with the help of the government, did an excellent job. I believe that is, and that's why whenever we were affected in 2009 by this financial crisis that was created here in the U.S., and a lot of people were saying, wow, the Venezuelan economy is going to collapse, how is it going to fall and everything. I always said, listen, you don't understand. You don't understand. I mean, we can survive without the oil because those misiones were based a lot in glass works. And the same thing happened with Mission Robinson. I mean, I know about indigenous communities in the border with Brazil that organize themselves to receive national guards that bring the TVs and the devices that were used to teach people how to read and write. And that happened because of community organization that has been since the beginning something very important for the Bolivarian Revolution, if you ask me.
Well, first, I don't know if everybody knows that Cuba is the country that I think has sent the most doctors to West Africa, Sierra Leone, to help combat Ebola. They sent 165 and they're going to send another 300. They just decided they're going to do that today, I think.
Yes.
The U.S. is sending, they're just using it as an excuse to militarize it. They're sending 3,000 soldiers. But I was wondering, the ELAM in Cuba and Venezuela, could you say how big they are, how many students are there? And then another thing, I remember when I first came to Chicago, like 77, there used to be community health clinics, as I recall. so I never had to use one. I was wondering how they got dismantled, if I remember correctly, or am I misremembering?
Well,
But then also, I remember I read a long time ago in that almost paper before it became kind of,
before Pritzker took it
Yes.
over, right?
they had articles saying that about abuse against women. They said there was more shelters for animals than there were for women. I was wondering, is anything going on in the women's movement for against abuse of women in Chicago? That's in healthcare for women who are abused.
Okay, well,
But can they answer that for me because I'll forget. The
okay,
first question about Elam, how many students?
okay,
Oh,
do that first.
So Elam has, it's set up similar to the Elam in Venezuela. So there's, the first 2 years are done at the main campus, and then for the last 4 years, which are the clinical years, the students are dispersed across the whole country to the different teaching hospitals. And there's about 1,000 students per year in the program, maybe a little bit more. So there's about 3,000 students at that main campus in a pre-med year and the first 2 years of medicine, and then those get distributed across the country to work in the different hospitals.
So in Venezuela, you saw the figures. We have 400 right now in the main campus and 1,700 as an overall. But the government has been talking about receiving. They're trying to, let's see that Cuba, to try to set a goal of receiving 1,000 also students, as you say, every year. But we are not there yet.
So, so two things, the clinics, community clinics, and then violence against women. Okay. So I'm not an expert on the services for these things. I think that the clinics that were started, for instance, by the Black Panthers and other groups, there are still some free clinics that are around. Now, this is one of the crazy things about our healthcare system: is you go to a free clinic, you have to prove that you don't have insurance. And sometimes you have to prove that your income is low enough so that you don't qualify for insurance. Otherwise, they won't take you in the free clinic and you have to go somewhere else. So this is insane. That's the way it works. That's what they have to do because they don't have the resources to expend on people who can get care elsewhere. So some of the clinics, I think, were the precursors of what we now call federally qualified health centers, which have to have a community board and can't turn people away for lack of ability to pay and so on. So there are a couple of problems with that. One is that now we have, under the ACA, more people with insurance, and many of those people have unaffordable underinsurance, which means they have huge deductibles, so they need care. They go someplace that wants them to pay. They can't pay, so they go to a community clinic. The community clinic takes care of them, as they're obliged to do, but the people don't have the money to pay their services up to their $5,000 deductible, so the clinic is just out that. So now these clinics are struggling to survive. The other thing that I've heard a young Chicago nurse say about the FQHCs is that they're the charter schools of healthcare. So they're the excuse to privatize what public system we have left. Close down the public service delivery and tell those people that they can go to FQHCs. So as far as violence against women, I think there might be people here who know more about that than I think that's complicated because there's been some tendency at least to criminalize violence against women, and of course it is wrong, but to bring in the criminal justice system to intervene in that, which means then you have police intervening in the criminal justice, and not everybody is convinced that the police are going to serve to protect them against violence, and certainly there are many cases in which the police added violence to what women were already experiencing. So it's a big struggle, I think, in the women's movement and many communities to find a way of dealing with domestic violence in a way that protects women and protects children and that helps to maintain and build families instead of destroying them and having more people go into, ending up in jail or prison. Does that make sense? And I'm not an expert on that, but it certainly is a difficult issue. And we just don't approach it from the point of view of starting out with valuing all of these people and building from there. We don't do that.
Yeah, I have a question from Jesus about the security and safety of these Cuban doctors, because kind of it could create so much problem with them, especially in the barriers, which is not that don't have the best security and safety record. That's from Jesus. And the other question I have from all the panelists is about the dental care, because dental care includes lots of things from the childhood, adolescence, the bracing, and to save the, besides cosmetics, is to save the future of the teeth and the health of them. And then from implants, expensive things like that. How are those included in the dental clinics, or just the emergency or the ordinary?
In Venezuela or in Cuba, right? In both countries?
Both countries, yes.
If you want to start, because I can start.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm not an expert in that part of the dentist program. I don't have too much information about that, but I believe that they cover most of the important. It's not like here that you go to a free consultation with a dentist and they just whiten your teeth or something like that. I mean, it's comprehensive, but I'm not sure. I don't wanna lie to you. I don't have the details about all the things that they cover, but I understand that they do complex procedures in Misión Barrio Adentro for the dentist part of Misión Barrio Adentro. But I don't have the numbers. In the case of the security, yes, I mean, that's one of our, the crime problem issue in Venezuela is a big issue. It's a problem that we haven't addressed yet, and it's complex. It's hard to address. And I believe anyway that the Cuban doctors have not been very affected by that, even though they work and live, because of what I told you of the community organization, I believe. I mean, people in their poorest shantytown, where most of the violence is in Venezuela, organize themselves to protect their doctors. But of course I hear of cases of, I believe that once I hear of a Cuban doctor that was killed. But I haven't heard, I mean, I'm talking about in 10 years, I believe that once I hear about a Cuban doctor that was killed in a gunshot or something in a barrio in Caracas. But yes, and another thing is the violence promoted by the right wingers that also has been attacking premeditatedly Barrio Adentro clinics, because that's part of the demonization of whatever have to do with Cuba and socialism, and they think that they are doing a nice thing and they don't understand that they are looking very bad abroad, trying to kill clinics or hanging Cuban doctors, like, how you say that in effigies of Cuban doctors in bridges or things like that. They do that. I mean, the right wingers in Venezuela are that fascist. But anyway, I believe that if you take the overall, I haven't seen all the numbers, but I have read some things about the security around the Cuban doctors, and I believe that it's not that bad. Of course, it might be better if we solve the crime problem.
In terms of dental care in Cuba, dental care, they don't make the distinction between dental care and medicine. So dental care is fully covered. Also, it's subject to the same limitations that all of medicine there is, in that there are limited resources, but they have full orthodontics, oral surgery. There's the system's basically set up with small one-room clinics in the neighborhoods, like where the people live, and then there's like a central, they call it a polyclinic, which has like basic specialties, a lab, x-ray machines, and so there's always a dentist in that center. You may have to go to a more specialized center if you need oral surgery or orthodontics, but dental care is freely available to everybody. And then on an added note, eye care is also included and very much available. And there's a huge push in Cuba now, actually, that they're doing LASIK surgery on a massive scale. which they also offered. I didn't qualify for it, but they offered it to all of the students who were studying there too. So when I was studying there, I was all of the services that are available to Cuban citizens were available to me too. So a lot of my classmates actually got free vision correction surgery. But and I know the Project
But why you didn't qualify?
because my corneas are too thin.
Okay.
As a medical reason. But so that there's a huge push towards, you actually don't see I think in the past you didn't see very many people with glasses in Cuba because they weren't available, and so Cuba just skipped glasses. So we're gonna go straight to just correcting everybody's vision. So I mean, there's, you don't see anybody really over, their mid-20s who still wears glasses because everybody gets the surgery to correct it. And in the long term, it's cheaper for Cuba to pay the money up front, do the surgery, and then not have to worry about getting glasses for people down the line. So,
And it's probably many of you know that in this country, dental care is not available to very many people. And that was the Medicaid reform in Illinois in 2012 that was offensively called the SMART Act, included eliminating dental care except for emergencies, which means pulling somebody's teeth, which is a failure of dental care. And then later they decided that was going to cost them more money because there were people going to the emergency room with abscesses and things, so they restored the dental services. They still didn't restore most of the other cuts that they made.
that's for Medicare.
This is for Medicaid in
For
Illinois.
Medicaid.
Right, Illinois Medicaid. Yeah, but there are many people in this country who don't have access to dental care, and you see lots, I know lots of people with disabilities who have never had that available to them and have fewer or no teeth, sometimes in their 30s.
And the only, just from my practice here, the only services that are available in Chicago is, that I know of, is the Cook County Dental Clinic that takes a very limited number of people, and all they do is tooth extractions. So if I have a patient who has a dental problem, I can tell them to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and call the number over and over again, and the first 10 people that they answer the phone for will get an appointment. They'll go in the next day and they'll get their tooth pulled out. And then of course they're going to have major orthodontic issues later on because the teeth have shifted, and there's nothing, there are a few places that will do pro bono work, there's a few free clinics, but they're incredibly hard to get into, and it's a huge problem that we
that's the
can't
other
provide.
thing. So Medicaid, they decided to start paying for those services again, but they're still not available to people.
Yeah, you have to find a
There are very
dentist who
few.
will accept Medicaid.
Which are very few.
And that's why there's no dental coverage in Medicare, because nobody has any teeth left by then.
Harold? Yeah, I just wanted to ask that if, I know that during the earthquake in Haiti, that Cuba called upon some of the American doctors who had been educated in Cuba to help out in Haiti. I'm wondering, have they done anything like that with this Ebola outbreak in Africa?
So I actually just got an email about a week ago asking if I could put them in contact with other graduates. So yeah, there's definitely a call. The call only went out in the last week or two, so I'm not sure what the response has been yet. I know with Haiti there were a lot of students who had graduated but hadn't gotten into residency yet. They were still working on tests, so they were in a good position to be able to take a few months and go to Haiti, and so a bunch of students did. And I imagine we'll see a similar thing in this case. I can't go, I have to stay here and finish my residency, but I wish I could. But I think for sure that we'll see some alum graduates going. And I was in school at the time, and there was a bunch during Haiti, and there was a bunch of us who were begging to be let out of school for a little while to be able to go, and they said no, you guys have to stay here and finish studying. But some of the kind of people in their last year of schooling also went to Haiti to work and did actually some of their training in Haiti, so they got credit towards their degree for some of the time that they spent in Haiti working there.
And Venezuela does not do anything like that.
I just know that Maduro announced yesterday in United Nations that we were going to contribute with $5 million to this fund that has been created in the United Nations to fight Ebola. But I haven't heard yet about, we lack of Venezuelan doctors still. We still have Cuban doctors in Barrio Adentro. I mean, I believe that they are more than half or close to half of the doctors. We have been doing a nice job preparing and forming community doctors based in the Cuban model, but
And a lot of them studying at alum. There's a large number of Venezuelan students studying at alum.
and I believe that we have a humongous contingent of Venezuelans studying there, right?
Yeah, that's probably the largest contingent.
And we have been doing the same thing in Venezuela, creating these schools, but we still need to do a lot of things to reach the level of Cuba.
I was wondering if you could, all the panel members could talk about what is the level of political education, if any, built into the programs for preparing doctors, whether it's explicit or implicit.
Well, I'll start with the United States because
That's the
it's
easy one.
very, very little, if any.
Or a
And in
lot
fact,
of
there's,
wrongs.
It's in the wrong
yeah, that's true
direction.
too. Yeah, in the wrong direction, that's true. I mean, some hospitals won't let us come and talk, won't let Physicians for a National Health Program physicians, of whom I'm one, come into their hospitals and talk, give an educational talk on single-payer healthcare, the program that we propose. They say it's too political. They won't let us talk
The
about it.
president didn't let anybody know.
Yeah,
Right, the president, the Senator Baucus, had the doctors and nurses who went there to talk about single payer arrested, so that's it.
How is in Cuba?
So in Cuba, I think just the entire basis of the program is a form of political education. I mean, they're very clear that they don't require any specific political beliefs for people to come into the program. Some of the people who come in based on different countries will come in through like the Communist Party or the Socialist Party of that country. Other countries, all the countries also accept people directly through the embassies, thank you. Directly, so people can apply directly through the embassies to get in. In terms of the education there, I mean, I think it's political in the sense that they teach you to care about the patients. They teach you, a way of approaching medicine, but with the exception of a few anatomy textbooks that we had from the Soviet Union that were translated from Russian into Spanish. So that was really interesting read, trying to learn Spanish through a Russian translated textbook. Anyway, there was, occasionally there was an introduction that quoted Jose Marti or something like that, but there wasn't too much kind of explicit political education. I don't think that they're trying to train people to be politicians. They're trying to, but I think a lot of the political message is telling people to go back and work in underserved communities and teaching people to care about their patients and what healthcare looks like and going back and kind of spreading that mission that way.
In the case of Venezuela, I don't have the details, but I believe that because we are basically replicating what the Cubans are doing, maybe like that. But what I've seen while finding information for the presentation from their website is that they do a lot of cultural activities. I believe that maybe in Cuba they do the same. Mm-hmm. And I believe that in the core of those activities, they do a lot of political work. But I don't know about if we have particular subjects in the curricula that are related to, ideologization or things like that. I don't know. For example, I studied in the Soviet Union. I don't have to say that. I studied in the Soviet Union for between 86 and 89, and a long time ago. And I remember that as a foreign student, we had like at least one or two subjects related to ideology. To history of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union or things like that. But I don't know if that happened in a lab.
I just want to bring up one other thing that I just kind of heard from, there's a particular nurse who specializes in addressing medical errors, and for instance in hospitals, especially in hospitals, through communication. And her observation, which drives her nuts understandably, is that as doctors get socialized into their profession, they don't want to be like nurses. And this comes down to not wanting to use the same language that nurses speak. I know this sounds nuts, but so that therefore finding a way for nurses and doctors to exchange communication is very difficult. I mean, this is nuts, but this is what she says, and I believe her. And I was told several times, and I was honored by it, that I thought like a nurse. I thought that was an honor. I learned a lot from nurses in the time that I was in training, but I trained at County, and if you train some other places, apparently that doesn't happen.
What's the difference?
Is it?
You don't want to go into that. If you're interested, I'll send you her blog site. You can read on it yourself.
This is kind of a follow-up on Bill's question. I can understand not having ideological courses in Cuba, but was there the opportunity to go to lectures or discussions that did involve politics, if you were interested?
Yeah, so there's so Cuba has a lot of kind of political groups that are around interest groups. So there's like a large women's organization across the country. There's a workers' organization. There's the Federation of University Students, and so all of our campuses had a chapter of the Federation of University Students. So it's the organization that represented students at that level. All of our schools had a chapter of the Young Communist League, which was open to the Cuban students more than for us, but we could participate in activities that they did. The school organized events. We had a big contingent in the May Day March every year. We did activities like one day we all went out and picked potatoes, which was fascinating. And there were kind of political activities like that were definitely available. And then obviously everything that is happening in Cuba was available to us also. But yeah, there were definitely specific activities open for people if they were interested.
I've got a question, and I think we'll soon be wrapping up the kind of formal portion of the program. We'll be mingling and hopefully enjoying some more food. There's a lot of it. My question, and we can take one more after this, is we talked a little bit about violence earlier, and here in Chicago, violence is a plague in the communities of the South Side and West Side, especially poorer communities. So I was wondering if, in the long term, this is a question for all three of the panelists, in the long term, is expanding access to healthcare, to community-based healthcare, is that a way of addressing the problem of violence in low-income communities, or is it more something that will just kind of clean up the aftermath? Thank you, Harold. The aftermath of the violence.
Okay, let me start, because that's one of our biggest problems. I don't know, it's complicated. I mean, I sometimes try to ask myself what is happening in Venezuela, that after, like more than 14 years of revolution, we still are struggling with violence. From my perspective, I always saw that through education, allowing access to people, with all those social programs that I mentioned, I'm still hoping that at some point, because of allowing access to everyone to education, we will get rid of violence. I don't think that through health programs. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm not taking something into consideration. But I believe that is something more related to values, to education, and the problem that we have, and I believe that we have, for example, in the case of Venezuela, we have invested a lot of money trying to change the curricula, trying to, prepare the people to make them a better man and woman. But we are doing something in the schools in Venezuela, and because we are still open to the West, very open to the West, and we have DirecTV, and we have all the media the same way you have it here. What we do in the school in the morning is destroy afternoon with the TV. That's my opinion, okay? I'm talking about what I think about is being destroyed by the TV at night or in the afternoon. So it's complicated, and we have been also trying to regulate and create some legal infrastructure to regulate the content and having a better content, national content, and things like that. But I believe that we still need to do more things, addressing the problem of the media and the values that the media try to spread all over, and maybe also trying to do a better job in the educational system. That's my opinion, my humble opinion.
I doubt that anybody really knows the answer to your question, but I do think that the structure of the healthcare system can contribute to increasing violence or to decreasing violence. And that a healthcare system that is founded on the needs of people instead of on generating profits for corporations, and that is that decreases instead of increasing income inequality, and that respects the people that you're taking care of, and offers from among the people that you're taking care of, makes available to some of them to become then the caregivers. I mean, I think those kind of things should tend to decrease violence as opposed to what we have now. One of the things that's come up in the mental health clinic, mental health movement meetings. So Commissioner Shuker tells a lot of lies, but anyway, so one of the programs that he boasts of is reproductive justice in the high schools. Well, in a city council hearing where most people did not actually get to be heard, one woman said that she believes that that justice should, I use the right word, reparative justice. Is that the right word? Restorative justice. Oh, thank you. Yeah, restorative justice in the high schools. She said restorative justice needs to start with the city council and the mayor, because they're the ones who take away the clinics. I mean, that injustice, that is violence against people, and they're going to respond with the same thing, because what other choices do they have?
I actually think that's a really interesting question. The hospital that I work at does like a community survey every couple of years, and one of the questions they ask is about what they think are the major health concerns in the area or for themselves. And so you would kind of expect it to be something like diabetes or hypertension, but actually the number one answer that people gave was questions of safety and violence. And I think it's interesting because it's not something that you consider normally as like a health issue specifically. You don't have a 15-minute appointment and a patient comes in and says, like, doctor, there's a lot of violence in my community. What are you going to do to solve it? So I think the way that our system is set up right now, no, there's like nothing that our healthcare system can contribute to kind of ending the issue, to dealing with the issues of violence. But I do think that there is a lot of room and space in a different type of healthcare system to really address some of those issues. And I think it has to do with having like really community-based medicine, because I mean, kind of like the example he was saying that that to put these clinics into these communities in Venezuela, the neighborhood had to come together and they had to find a space for those people to be. And when people put that work in, then they become protective of it and they want to make sure that it's successful. And I think. And then the experience of having a doctor who lives in the neighborhood and who works with that community and knows all of the people who live there, and they know how they're related and they know who's fighting with who and who doesn't like who. And at 2 o'clock in the morning, you see somebody is sick, then somebody goes and gets the doctor and brings him to the house. I think that creates a kind of community where people feel a relationship with the doctor, where the doctor can be somebody that you go to when there are problems of violence, and they can kind of bring in the appropriate authorities. I think there's room in healthcare overall to be a basis for creating communities where people feel comfortable and feel supported and feel like there's something that they can work together to build and kind of make them more protective of their communities.
I've read. I just wanted to follow up on this. I'm not sure it was Venezuela, but I've read about a program in one of the Latin American countries, and I don't know how widespread it was or whether it was fairly local, about particularly addressing domestic violence, which Stan asked about holding people who commit domestic violence accountable to the community, to the local community. And I don't know details about it because I read a very sketchy account, but does that sound familiar to you?
No. Maybe that happened in another country, or maybe I don't know.
Right.
So, but I don't remember reading something about it. Or
There was
no.
a different way of thinking about it, addressing it, but not calling in other violent people from outside to come and quash this violence, but having this whole thing be accountable to the community and solve it.
That makes sense.
What Corey was saying made me think is sometime recently there's a small movement started to get pediatricians to ask in their general exam when they're talking to parents to ask whether there are guns in the home. And there was an uproar. What goddamn business is it of yours to, whether I have guns in my house or not? Trying to address violence as a health issue in this country, it's like you run up against this brick wall.
That makes sense too.
With that, I think we've reached the 8:30 mark. So we're going to once again thank our panelists for a really wonderful presentation.